How do you talk about goals and financial projections in your pitch deck story? Let's find out. Now let's talk about goals, because in many cases, before people give you their money or their time and attention, they need to know your goals. Where are you going? Because they want to assess if they want to join you on this proposed journey. So once again, what you share in this section will depend on your audience. Now, investors want to know what are your project and business goals and what is the expected return on investment. They also want to get a sense of your expenses so they can estimate how long will it take to get their return on investment. And this is where they get to assess how well you know your numbers and if you're the right person to manage this project or business, because they might like your idea, they might like your solutions and what you're doing, but they might not trust you as a person with their money. Now, the market wants to know if your solutions are reliable. If they buy something from you, will you be there for the foreseeable future to help them with that purchase? Because in many cases, business sell things and then they end up shutting down. Now, I had that happen a couple of times, once with a gym where I just paid for the membership and the gym shut down, and another time with a tanning salon where I just bought a package and then they shut down. So it does happen. Businesses shut down, and there are many clients who have paid for these services and now they end up losing on what they paid for. So you need to share some goals to show the buyers or affiliates or vendors or suppliers that you plan to stick around. Can you share with them some specific goals to show that you are going to be there for the foreseeable future? And when you're talking with your teams, of course, you need to share your goals, because they cannot help you reach your goals unless you share it with your teams. So your target goal for this section really is to create a clear goals for your project or for your business. And if you are talking to investors or financing any financial conversation, you might need to provide financial projections. So what are your goals from a finance perspective, not just as a project or a business perspective? Now, in terms of finances, there are many terms, so I'm not going to get into that. And these terms might vary based on your business, your industry, or jurisdiction. So I would always say, always consult with a lawyer to make sure you have the right documentation based on your business journey or your project. That's not something I can advise you with, but if you get familiar with these terms, it'll be easier for you as well when you're talking to accountants. Because if you're just going there and you are not familiar with these terms, it could be too overwhelming. So do familiarize yourself, and that's why I would recommend going to websites like Investopedia, where you can find definitions of these terms. So at least you have an idea, and when you're talking to your accountant or your lawyer, you know what they are talking about. But from a very, very high level, on a pitch deck perspective, you don't necessarily dive into everything. You might, if you're talking to investors or funding agents, share your financial statements. Now, financial statements would apply if you already have some kind of finances in your business. Have you been in business for around a year already? So you might have some statements to show what have been your expenses, what has been your income, and things like that. Now, the main thing about a financial statement is that it follows generally accepted accounting principles. It's called the GAAP, GAAP. So it could be something that has been audited, something that has been prepared by your accountant. So that's how you would get that financial statement. But if you're a new company or a startup and you still don't have any numbers to share, you can use something called a pro forma. Now, a pro forma is a method of calculating financial results using projections and assumptions. So you still don't know, you're just making an assumption. So it does not use generally accepted accounting principles. So if you've never started or operated a similar business, it'll be hard for you to make these assumptions. So that's why you might need to consult with someone who has done this before. Now, in many cases, you might not have all the details, so we just want to start with something. We always have that starting point. And one of the best starting points really is to create a list. So create a list of all the products and services you can provide, and then get an estimate of how much it will cost you to provide them and how much do you plan to charge for them. Remember, we did that exercise in the business model where you had the key activities, key resources, and key partnerships. How much will all of these cost you so that you can come up with the best pricing plan? Will you be charging a fixed price? Will you you be charging a dynamic pricing? Now, if you're not sure, you can look for other service providers or people who have a similar business or project in your area and get an idea of how much they're charging. At least this will give you a starting point. The next thing is to set goals. So based on your current team setup, resources, as well as sales and marketing capabilities, how many sales do you estimate you can make? What would be a reasonable number? So now you know how much you want to charge, what is a reasonable number that you can deliver, and then based on that, using that data, you can come up with some assumptions, and that would be your pro forma. So you might not reach them, but you can share that this is what our goal, this is what we think we can achieve. So that's really what the pro forma is about. It's not audited, it does not use accounting principles, it's your estimate of what you think you can reach. Now, of course, this is a specialized skill, and very few people have that skill unless they've done this before or they have some kind of accounting, sales, or marketing experience. That's why I would always recommend to look for experts to help you with these documents, whether it's the financial statements or the pro forma. Especially if you're talking to investors or financing agents, they're going to be able to see through the cracks, so they will know if your plan makes sense or not. So you might as well have someone who knows what they're doing help you. So once again, I'd recommend go to pitchbook.com. You're going to find many people who are familiar with creating these pro forma sheets and financial statements, and it could vary based on your industry. So whether it's technology or it's a tangible product, an e-commerce, a retail business, so there could be variations. So make sure that you're picking someone who is familiar with your specific industry. You can also, of course, go to Top Tal Finance. You'll find many advisors there who can help you as well, and you could also look to resources like Upwork. If you're on a limited budget, you might find people from other countries that can help you at a lower cost, but always be mindful that even though they might be lower cost, they might be an expert in their own country, they might not be an expert in your country or your jurisdiction. So another tip would be to go to LinkedIn and see who in your local area has done this before. So as an exercise, I just went on LinkedIn. I was preparing these slides and I wanted to show you how you can find some people who are specialized. So I did a special search on LinkedIn and I came up with this account, Mike Lindell. And I was surprised to see that he actually did have an article on LinkedIn about that, and he had some examples. So going through his example, which is specialized in software as a service. So more specifically, that's his area of expertise. So right now, if I know anyone who needs to come up with a pro forma for a software, I would guide them to Mike. But if it's projections for some other kind of business, I would do a bit more research to find someone who has done this for that particular industry. Now, based on the software, you can see here, this is how he prepared a pro forma. So in this particular example, he's using the numbers of estimated subscribers, and he's making an estimated guess at the revenue. What are the costs, operating costs, and using all of these numbers, he's come up with a prediction of what the income could be for year 1, 2, or 3. So usually with the projections, you're talking about a 1, 2, 3, maximum 5 years, because no one can know what will happen in 5 years. So in this particular example, it's 3 years. Now, on his second example, he goes into a little bit more detail. So this is something definitely not to share on your initial pitch deck. This is something you would share with repeat conversations. So he has a more breakdown with month by month. How would that happen? And this will come in handy in case investors ask you, well, how did you come up with this number? So you might need that detailed chart to say, this is why we came up with this particular projection. Now, you don't have to show a full table of numbers. You can use charts. So you can just create a simple chart where you have the revenue and expenses. This is what you expect would happen. And rather than calling it the exact specific finances, you call it 3-year goals. This is our goals. Now, whether you reach that goal or not, it's questionable. But you're showing you have a goal and you have the resources, as far as you know, to your best knowledge, that you can reach that goal. So in this particular slide, the goal is 6,000 subscribers by year 3 and increase revenue with minimal expenses. So you can use something like that. Now, if you don't want to share numbers, you can use a generic slide. I see many slides like this on introductory pitch deck where you just say, our 3-year goal is we're going to have 20,000 subscribers and we're going to hit 20 million in revenue by 3 years. So you're not showing the exact numbers, but keep in mind that investors and financing experts are going to be asking you for the details. So you need to to have these details ready. You can put them in the appendix section towards the end in case someone asks. You can share them, but not necessarily on your initial pitch deck. Now you can have multiple revenue streams. So if you wanted to show your projections for how each revenue stream will contribute to your overall numbers, that could also come in handy in some situations. So in this example, modeled after one of my projects for a client, but I did change the numbers and the values. So you can see here how in year 1 and year 2, and year 3, most of the income would be coming in from advisory fees. So they plan to be advisors like a consultant, and by year 3 they're planning to start getting that intellectual property. So they're creating a training course, they're training a program that they want to license, and this will scale their income. Because if you're scaling an active income, it's going to be very hard if you're a consultant. The fastest way to do that is if you have something, an intellectual property that you can license or product that you can sell. So in this particular case, as you can see here, by year 6 most of the income will be coming in from the intellectual property. So if you're looking for investment and advisors, you're showing them the big picture, the roadmap of how you plan to reach your goals. Because if it's just consulting, then that's going to be very questionable. Whereas if you have intellectual property, then that is doable. Now, in many cases, you might not want to share the specific numbers. You might only want to keep that confidential until you have until the final stages of the conversation. So I have seen many people who just use a generic pitch deck like this. They use the visual to show that they're planning. Really, the only number that matters on this slide is 10 million by year 5. So they're showing we have a goal that we plan to reach 10 million by year 5. And some of the description you can add how you plan to do that. So in here, increased billable and IP revenue by building a strong foundation, elevating brand, and creating systems and processes. So they're showing that we plan to reach this goal by having systems and processes in place. Now, another way to share your goals is really to have that timeline. I do like that timeline, especially for project management and new startups that don't want to be talking about money. Maybe they're still in the product development or the project development phase, so the timeline can come in handy. So if you already have a completed timeline, or you just want to have one milestone, you can show this is our final goal. Or I'm going to take you back to that example that I showed you earlier when we were talking about traction, how you can combine your milestones and your goal on one slide. So you can show we've already had some goals and we've hit them, and here are our future goals. So you're building that trust that we do keep our promise, we know what we are talking about. You can show what has been completed and what is planned. Now, another way to talk about goals is to say our future roadmap. This is very common in investment presentations or internal presentations when you're talking to your teams. What's your roadmap for the next quarter, for the next year? So you might break it down by month, you might break it down by quarter, or step by step for the year. So you get to decide how that would work on your case. It's called the future roadmap or your goals. It's really the same thing. Now, what about if you're using your pitch deck to generate more clients and customers? So you're using it more as a sales presentation, not an investor presentation. You can still use that goals section, but instead of sharing numbers about finances, you would be sharing your project or company goals. Now, this would be a great location to share your vision and mission statement. Remember when we talked about that in the first section of this masterclass, where we talked about sharing your vision and your mission and how that's part of your purpose statement. So rather than cluttering the front of your presentation with all about you, you can talk about your audience, and then as you get towards the end, you can say, well, this whole project fits our vision and our mission, which is what we plan to do with the industry. Now, this would work very well, specifically if you're talking about environmental, social, and government issues. So we did that for Phil Connect. We did not talk about future financial projections. We just talked about what does the company, how does the company aim to reach the environmental goals. So you'll find many templates on the market that prompt you to do that. You can talk about, like this one here from Canva, reducing our ecological footprint. That could be your goal. If you're talking to clients, if you have a salon, if you have a restaurant, you might have gone, they might show you we have a future menu, we have a new treatment coming up in a specific month, or you might see how each month they might introduce something new. Really, the entire idea here is to show your audience that you have goals, you're keeping the business on your mind, you're looking into the future. That could be whether you're planning to grow your team, whether you're announcing a new location, a new branch office, a new menu item, a new service. It could be anything you want. So you get to decide if you want to call it future roadmap, goals. Give it a meaningful title. It doesn't have to be just goals, something that will be relevant to your audience. The idea is to pick something to show them that you have goals and you know what you're talking about. Because really, by sharing your projections and goals, you're helping your audience understand your focus, your drive, and motivation. What is motivating you to keep this project and business going? The idea is to help them understand also how you plan to deliver over the next few years. So once again, start a checklist. So I did one here for you as a starting point, but what you put on that checklist will depend on your circumstance and who you're talking to. So create a checklist of some kind of goals or projections you can share with your audience, something that will be meaningful for them and that will help you with your particular story, and keep that checklist on your radar so that you're always updating this information with the latest on your radar. Now, my tips for you here would be to avoid adding confidential goals and numbers on public files. So if you're sharing the initial pitch deck, which just could be a pitch deck that you share as a PDF with hundreds or sometimes thousands of people, you don't want to be putting all the details in it. It's just very high level. And it's only when people ask you during the face-to-face meetings, you can share some more details with them. So during the face-to-face meetings, you might want to keep the extra numbers, the financial statements in the appendix section. So if it comes up, if they ask you, how did you come up with these numbers? You can go to the appendix section and bring it up. Try to avoid cluttering the pitch deck with a lot of numbers. And also make sure your numbers make sense and that you're not over speculating. Now, I do know that a lot of people, when they're starting a business or a project, there is that initial optimism and everyone thinks that they're going to be doing much better than they can. In most cases, that people overestimate. In some unique cases, people underestimate. So that's why I would always say under promise and over deliver rather than promise something big and not something that you're not able to deliver. And if you have doubts about your numbers, get a consultant who's done this before so they can make sure that your numbers make sense. It's something that you can achieve. So now let's get to your action items. Your action item for this section really is to create clear goals for your project and your business. And if you're not sure how to do that, consult with an accountant or financial statement advisor. More specifically, if you're creating financial statements and projections, you want to make sure that these numbers are accurate and that you're not over speculating, especially if you're talking to investors and funding agents. So go ahead, get started, and I'll see you in the next video.